Everybody, thank you all for coming back to the pigsty. We have Manda with us tonight. We have Dave. We have Sal. And of course, our guest of honor, we have Nick. So thank you all for coming and joining the after party. Nick, if you just want to very quick synopsis, your channel, all the links are in the description and stuff. But if you want to just let us know who you are.
Sure. My name is Nicholas Lamar Souter. I am an author. I've written 2 books. You can find them on Amazon. Just do very different kinds of books. That's a whole other story. And then I also I'm an educator. I also run a YouTube channel. It's called InTime. It is a news, culture, and politics show. It's also a punditry, and we do interviews and just sort of commentary on what's going on in the news. A lot of jokes recently about freebasing Lysol. That's kind of the stuff that we cover. Freebasing Lysol. We are against it. I'm aware that the President of the United States has in fact recommended that people either inject, snort, or freebase Lysol or Clorox bleach. We on InTime have decided that we are against that practice and have come out rather strongly against it. I wish this were a joke.
Yeah, you just caught me off guard with the names. Not being in America, I didn't catch the names. I do know.
Oh, freebasing. Yeah, that's yeah.
Aren't you meant to take the neutral position, being a newsman?
Actually, no. That's one of the misconceptions about we go out. We start the first half of the show is basically these are the facts, these are what we know, and then we say, okay, what do we think about it, and then we break it down. We are neutral, and we say this is what is known. Then we engage in the punditry, and most of our followers want a little bit of both. So closer to Anderson Cooper. Sometimes I say Glenn Beck, depending.
I have to say Anderson Cooper's hair is nicer, though.
Then Glenn Beck or his?
Then Nick's.
Oh, yeah.
You have lovely hair, my dear. Have you any questions for Nick Manda? Or
no. Okay.
Thanks for supporting me.
All right. I will just because I hit on it, I will tell the 2 books. The first one it's a novel. It is a rebuttal to Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. So it is to sort of demonstrate why her model of capitalism actually could not possibly work. And it was Midwest Book Review said it was required reading for every American who questions authority in this country, and then it was also said, should be required reading for every high school student in this country. It got a whole number of awards and stuff like that. The good news is nobody paid for it. Nobody actually bought it, so it's not like I'm rich or anything. It's got great critical reviews, but nobody's ever heard of it. And then the other one was Confessions of a Sin Eater. It is the memoir of a man who was a prison psychologist at Walpole Super Maximum Security Prison for 10 years. That one's the more interesting one, I think, and that's a reasonably brutal one. If you look up what's the scariest thing as a psychologist a patient has ever told you. I actually on Quora have the highest, last I checked, I think I've got the highest answer to that. I'm not a psychologist, but I worked with a psychologist and we did the book together, and I was like, this is what they said, and that still wasn't the scariest I've been told. That was just the scariest I felt I could commit to paper in a public forum. And it was pretty bad. And there were people demanding I take it down, and it got flagged, but it actually stayed up because no, it's a good answer.
Well,
that'll give you nightmares.
Have you ever broke the news and then realized afterwards, shit, that news we broke was wrong? I know you mentioned earlier with that one study that you went with, and then Fox at the very end was backing you up on it. But have you ever went the whole way forward and reported on something that has not been true?
Not yet, but there are people who call me out on that. But by the way, you're very careful with what we claim. So there was one report that Kim Jong-un had died. So we went live with it, and and the reason we went live with it was because the person reporting it was A, in a position to know, and B, was a credible source. She was the VP of Hong Kong Network News, which is their version of CNN. Yeah. And it's a credible network. Now, they didn't air it, but she had a way to know because her uncle was actually in his ministry. So she said it. So what we did was we reported that she had said it, and we were very clear about that. We said, look, we have one report, and this is again where we go from facts to punditry. So here are the facts. The facts is one person has said it. Do we believe it's credible or not? What we did was we said, okay, what's been going on in North Korea for the last 3 or 4 weeks? Kim Jong-un's sister. First of all, Kim Jong-un missed the single most important event. It is actually a religious event. It is honoring his grandfather as still basically the emperor of the country, even though he's dead. He's a living god. He missed it. You can't miss that. Then his sister came out. His sister uses a pseudonym. She uses a pseudonym because she doesn't want anyone to think she's trying to usurp power. His brother just looked like he was trying to usurp power, and he had him killed. Same thing with the uncle. You can't mess with. She started using her real name. That is punishable by death over there. So why is she using her real name in public? Then we got this tweet. So what I said was, we know these facts. So we guesstimated the probability that at this point we believed it was true. And I said about 80%. So now the question is, and actually there's one report that he's been seen, but it came out from them. There's video of him, but it came out from North Korea, so there hasn't been an independent. My confidence in that 80% has gone down, but it's still not at 0. Yeah. Okay, let's see if he comes out alive. Did we call it wrong? I don't know how you call out the 80% wrong. We said those facts, and then we said this is how we evaluate those facts. It will be a time when we come out and we get it wrong, but the reason that's important is because we understood we don't want to get it wrong. So we said, this is what we know. We are not saying he's dead, but we're saying our guesstimate as to the likelihood based on this information is about 80%. And there was no clickbait. It said he's reported dead. We said, this is what we mean. And every 10 minutes I sat there and said, this is what we know. So as of yet, we haven't gotten it wrong. Now, if it turned out that she hadn't, we check all our sources before we go live, and that can be tough. I kind of like that, though. It's like half an hour before going live. We're checking all the sources. We're making sure we know it. If we do something wrong, and we will, we're going to get one. We're going to totally screw the pooch on it because you do this long enough, you totally will.
Yeah. That's what
when that happens, we will come out and apologize. Yeah, but it hasn't happened yet.
It really did. It did seem like all signs really were pointing to him most likely being dead. This was a discussion I had with my son, actually. We were talking about like who would take over, because would it be his sister, would it be the general? But it really, for at least 4 or 5 days there, and for North Korea kept saying, oh well, he's fine, he's alive, but they fucking lie about him all the time. So I completely understand that.
Has there been an actual sighting of him? I haven't been paying attention. Like, he's been seen?
The only one I'm aware of is, yes, he's been seen, but that was a North Korean news agency, and he uses body doubles. He literally can be in 2 places at one time, including he could be 6 feet under and cutting the ribbon on which is what I think he was doing there.
I mean, this is the interesting thing. He could be dead, and the sister is still propping up with the various body doubles.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, again, that's why I also think that that's the value in our show. So we are very clear about what's fact. We're very clear about then we are going to try to extrapolate from those facts and give you sort of our best confidence. People are going to say, who are we to say this? Well, we're the people who've been looking at it and putting it together. You don't have to believe us. You can or can't. But based on over time, we are building a brand. So if we keep getting this shit wrong, nobody's going to want to watch the show. If we keep getting it right, people are going to want to watch the show. And even when we get it wrong, they're going to say, you know what? Yeah, but they usually know what they're doing. So that's it. That's what makes it. That's why it's so difficult. That's why I'm doing 80 hours a week, because we try never to fuck that up. You can fuck up badly once and the whole thing's done. So we bet our reputation reasonably frequently, and so far we've been okay on it.
One other question I wanted to ask is the name. I don't think I asked you this in the first instance. Whenever you type in InTime, if you're looking for it and have no, feedback from it or anything like that, you're going to get the bloody movie with Justin Timberlake.
Yeah.
And obviously you don't want to rebrand and change your name and all, but what came with the InTime? Was it I'm here now, or I'm never late, or?
You're not going to, I can't, the only reason I don't like asking this is because it's the most sort of mythical thing. I swear to God, we were trying to come up with a name, and we were trying to and it was very hard to come up with a name for what we do. And because we wanted to do the breaking news, which is a time, that's a race. I mean, the second we know it, I send out usually use everybody's phone, send out a thing. I'm like, we're going live in 30 minutes. Whoever's there is there. And it's a mad scramble to get everything done, including fact check everything that pulled the trigger on this. Time, it seemed to have something about time, but we didn't want to call it on time, and we didn't want to call it, and we're in the flow of doing it. We are in the process of engaging, and that's sort of what we do. We're trying to live that story and talk about that. Again, our first story too was the 6 officers shot in Baltimore. And we were covering it live as the officers were being held hostage, but we're also covering the social media. So Ansgar came out and found a woman who had strapped, I think I told you this one last time, a basket to her head and filled it with Skittles, Kit Kats, the whole 9 yards. She had a fanny pack and she was selling concessions. She's actually even at one point inside the police barricade, inside the barrier. And it's still too close. They're saying everybody has to back up because they're live ammo, and she's out there selling this shit. So we get to talk about the culture aspect of it. What is America's culture that there is literally, we talk about commercialism. They are selling concessions at a live shootout. So we do that while covering. So we're integrating social media, the whole 9 yards. And then I was asleep, and this is why it sounds completely stupid. And it's just like the sort of the name InTime that I just sort of woke up with that name. And it was supposed to be a temporary placeholder. So let's call it InTime until we get the real name. And he's like, oh, I think that's a great name for the show. I said, well, it's temporary. He goes, no, it's great. I was just like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, I did kind of like that name anyway. And that's how we got it.
It just stuck.
Yep.
Yeah, but if you do now, if anyone is looking for it, the links will be in the description. Dave's doing his thing. But if anyone does decide to look for InTime tomorrow, just don't put the space in between it. You look for no space, you get you.
A while ago, we ranked high. That's the other thing. The nice thing about InTime too is a lot of what we have an issue with Evergreen, because you can see all the breaking news from 6 months ago. Well, nobody wants to see that. Yeah. The interviews are evergreen. Some of that stuff is evergreen, but some of it isn't. But the other thing is the one good thing is we are always relevant. We're always relevant by definition, because as long as we're doing the breaking news, we are literally always relevant. So we will get some stories. We'll be punching way above our weight for however many subs we have. We'll have sometimes even more than that just watching a particular show if it's a big one and people are trying to figure. Again, the Iran one is a great example. I mean, the Iran one, we had hundreds at a time watching. So.
Yeah, but even if it is, I was going to say, even if it is just 100 people watching, that 100 people is definitely getting the information as it comes out. And a lot of respect for what you do, man. I'm just an idiot that talks on the internet. There's people out there that provide content that does make a difference to people. But definitely, as a news channel, again, I struggle to put you in that group of, I'm a YouTube channel.
There's a troll in the live chat. I just want to make people aware. His name is Tony Designs, and he wants to come in. I don't know. I think he wants to ask about like that Kim Jong-un story and stuff like that. Yeah. He's trying to take credit for passing that on to us. If the mods could like deal with that, because he's been hanging around for a while. He's a problem. I've
heard some stories.
It got the ears too. You can't trust aliens.
No, I do. I can't. Well, I'm not hold that against him. I always did growing up watching Star Trek. It was like, what does logic dictate? Or logic dictates. That's what it was from Spock. Which is what when mentioning the educational system, that is something that's missing in the education system. America does lack in a lot, but I think education systems as a whole do miss out on the critical thinking, the logical thinking, especially now with having YouTube, with having these platforms, because you can have people like fucking PewDiePie, and people will listen to him because he's got so many followings, so many people that follow him.
That's one, because my background was in philosophy, and that was my BA was in philosophy. That's when I was like, why did I actually have to go to college before I took an introduction to logic class? I was like, that's a bad thing.
No, but it is something
that's suggesting that we needed more Star Trek in our education system then.
Oh no, absolutely. And I think you need to cover why certain episodes, especially like say the Next Generation, and what was the arc, why did it start to sag kind of in the middle, what was Q, the philosophy of Q, There is that book, The Physics of Star Trek. I think that was Green did The Physics of Star Trek. I just love that he was talking about why you could never do a transporter, and he said one thing you'd have to do is, of course, break the molecules down. I mean, you'd have to break them apart. He said it's the most spectacular understatement I've ever heard in my life. It's hard to imagine how you could do that in an environmentally friendly way.
I left to let the dog back in. What did I miss?
You've got infinite energy available to you. You can do it easily enough.
Well, you could build it, but if you break apart the atomic particles of an entire human being, it's going to have an impact on the local environment. Quite a significant one. But you're right. It's fantasy. What was the other thing that somebody asked one of the writers on Star Trek? How do the Heisenberg compensators work? And he said they work very well. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Nick,
Quite
other
fun.
than... Sorry, go on ahead, Dave.
No, go on. I was going to point out because you were talking about news channels, and I don't watch any other news channels on YouTube.
Like, well, I would watch BBC and stuff like that, but other than an official one, could you?
No, I go and read it.
No, but could you point out? Could you point to me another one that's not BBC, that's not CNN, a channel that some guy started that's doing the same thing that Nick's doing?
Oh, there are channels. There are lots of not that it's so broad. There are lots of people that are trying to report specific. I mean, if you take an industry like the gaming industry, that there are ones that will cover the news as it breaks within that industry, within those niche things, but not one that's covering the general news. Picking up basically, you're picking up what is being offered in a sane way by the 24-hour news networks. And the point is that they shouldn't be running. It's insane to run news 24/7, right? It has caused so many problems over the last 2 decades because they make news out of nothing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you say something like general news, though. I mean, there's so much to cover globally. At the same time, there's so much that's being covered that means absolutely dick. So. Where do you where do you pick what's important to talk about, and who your base is that you're trying to talk to in general? I mean, someone like Nicholas, you're based in America, so do you talk more about American politics than you would stuff that's going on in the rest of the world? I mean, it's hard to get that down to what you want to get across and what's important at the time, as opposed to like the 24-hour news channels that just fill in fucking air with bullshit that doesn't matter. So
I always liked Chuck Roberts of CNN Headline News, and I remember when he got replaced with this, very big-breasted woman and the whole night. She was just reading the script and couldn't. And when she engaged on other topics, she doesn't now. He knew what he was doing. I have to imagine his job was reasonably boring, because what he would do is every half hour he'd just give the news stories, and then if there was an update, it would get inserted into that, and then he'd go with it. But I was like, that seems to me to be a reasonable model, because that nowadays, because there's on demand, you can go, you can ask your Alexa device to tell you what the news is. All of a sudden, that's not, and you can plug into Reuters and get that. But I think any national or international news organization, if they're going to be regular news, they're going to have that problem. And then you get with Fox, and you get, Morning Joe with Shannon Mead, or all these other really bizarre things. And it's sort of like, you water it down. And then you also have the ones who can't. And Fox is the worst at this, but MSNBC does this too. They're not as bad, but they do it. CNN does it, I think, less than either of them. But it's the where you can't tell the difference between their opinions and the facts that they're, and it's just sort of like,
So I'm so sorry, Nick. I'm so sorry.
Please go, please.
I apologize. I just caught me off guard. Fox went to court to lie, so they're not Fox News or Fox Entertainment, and they went to court to get that approved so that they could lie when they report the news. That's
something I think that would be interesting, because my parents live with me. They're elderly and I take care of them, whatever. And they are, ever since Trump was elected, it's fucking Fox News constantly. So I hear the shit that they say. I wish that there was some channel that offered, counterpoints to what they were saying. Say, this is what they said and this is why they're wrong. Because it is, I hear, like I said, I hear snippets of it maybe 10, 20 minutes a day at most because I can't fucking take it. But it is the absolute bullshit that they spew, and it is so wrong. And I wish that there was some channel that sat down and broke down the lies that they told and said, this is what they're saying and this is why it's wrong.
They can't counter it.
My ears are burning. We used to do more of that, but on our last couple of shows, we've actually highlighted specifically what, like, for example, Dr. Drew Pinsky, Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, all of their claims on COVID. Then how and when they had to walk them back, and then when they now they didn't lie about their claims, but Sean Hannity comes out and he lies about prior positions. He literally said COVID is a conspiracy. 2 weeks later, we are on top of COVID, and we've always been. So we have been doing some of that. We're not trying to do sort of gotchas, and we're not trying to make other channels look bad. But when it comes to saying, okay, Fox News is spreading things that are just not true, and when that becomes newsworthy, we are absolutely covering that when we can. Like I said, right now we're down to 1.5 full-time employees, so we're not quite on it as much as but we absolutely that is actually very much a part of our wheelhouse. And I am constantly bringing up Fox News and saying, okay, this is what they've said. This is what, and when we can, we also show clips of it. And that's the only other problem with InTime is we are demonetized left and right because we're just using, we end up, until recently, if you mentioned COVID, you got demonetized. They finally changed their policies on that. Now I can go back and apply for monetization on all our videos, but they've already aired. But it's the nature of what we're doing.
Jim Hall was on, he always panicked when somebody said that. If he was on a stream with us and someone brought it up, he was like, "No, don't say that! You can't say that!" But fuck it, we're not monetized here yet.
Oddly enough, I thought it was a good opportunity for the smaller channels because they're the only ones that didn't care.
Yeah.
Dave, why did you say that you can't counter what they say?
Well, you can. I mean, it's not that you can't say that what they're saying is wrong. It's just that the information is not getting. The people that are watching Fox
will not watch a debunk of Fox.
Are not in any way watching any other source of information that is giving them counterpoints.
They're not watching any other source of information at all.
Exactly.
Like my parents literally get their entire news platform from Fox, and that's it. They don't read from anywhere else. They don't listen anywhere else. They just and half of the time it's not even like the supposed news shows. It's the fucking pundits like Dan Bongino.
So wait. What you're saying is we need to start a channel that puts out news that looks exactly like Fox.
Hey, I like that.
Right? But puts out real news that people can put on TVs that their parents won't notice.
Hiring big titty blonde women. Let's go. We need some.
I'm gonna hire a load of body doubles for fucking Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
Well, what Fox does, because you just pointed out a great point, what Fox does that's truly insidious is they actually have good reporters at Fox. Believe it or not, they absolutely do. And if you know how to find them, they do good stories at Fox. And I always keep an eye on those because when I'm arguing with somebody who only watches Fox, I say, oh, well, XYZ. I say, no, here's a Fox News story on this. And they also republish AP and Reuters. So you can sit there, it's actually an AP story, but Fox republished, so this is a Fox because they put their brand on it. So, but they do that so that people think the pundits are news. So they actually do have legit news people there to give cover for them.
As well.
I'm sorry, what?
And they've been quitting as well.
Yes, they have.
When they've been pushed up against whether or not they can say the fucking news. Then there are some people. Well, there are progressively less and less people with integrity within the news at Fox. But they seem to be losing the battle on truth eternally.
Oh yeah. And it's kind of sad to watch because you can see people. I think there are people there too who are there because it's the news organization that needs them the most. They're like, no, this is the news organization where you have to bring some integrity. And Fox will say, oh, we want you. Come here and clean up the ship. But that's not true. It's really, we want cover. Come join us as cover. And then they're like, we're gonna do Sean Hannity for 55 minutes. You get 2.5 minutes because the rest is going to be commercials anyway. So
some of it is funny though. Like, as Mama says now over here, I've met people over here that are massive Trump fans and crazy fucking idiots that do watch Fox News from over here as well. And he always did say to me, well, you're not watching this, and I did it back and forth. I do watch the odd Tucker Carlson thing or something like that if it's on YouTube for shits and giggles. You don't take it serious. You watch it, and from my point of view, it's entertainment. I mentioned this to Amanda last week. She said, what the fuck are you watching Fox News for? And it's, well, I can't say, if somebody said if you said to somebody, all you do is watch Fox News, and they say, well, all you do is watch CNN. You can turn around and go, no, I seen what you seen, and what you seen is wrong. Being able to say that you have watched a wee bit of it, so you do know what they're putting up with, it is bullshit.
Oh yeah, well that's why you can't, and that's why, and I think you were asking earlier, like, what is it that in my spare time, a lot of what I do in my spare time is watch the news, but I'll even watch it on Fox because I want to know I really want to know what they're saying. My wife actually blocked that channel. She called up the cable company and said, I don't want to get the channel. And they're like, you're kidding. And she's like, no, they're like, it's part of the package. She's like, no, disable it. I don't want it. I was just like, can we at least have it? Because she's like, no. So I was like, okay, so I got to get Fox News on the thing. She's like, I can't believe you watched that. I was like, I have to see what the other side is saying. I have to know the arguments before I engage on them. So yeah, that's the okay, I'll drop it now. I was gonna wait until it pops up in the conversation. So that we did have we got a show tonight, which is we've been doing every week, and the COVID thing, keeping up with that because it's like that's live news like almost all the time. But I was tonight's show is stories from lockdown. Mm-hmm. And what we're doing is anybody who has a story they want to tell about what they've been experiencing, either going to the grocery store, trying to meet up with family. In some cases, it's been okay, somebody died, but we weren't able to get this death certificate because of this and that, or just what's been all the stories. It's just a hangout, and anybody can come in and just tell their story. We had a trucker come in talking about how he's pulling 80-hour shifts and has a signed document saying that he's allowed to violate all of the industry guidelines so that he can get food from one place to another. It's like the whole industry, it's just, we're learning so much of the behind the scenes stuff. So if anyone wants to come to that hangout, that's going to be on InTime tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern. So I forgot to mention that one earlier, but
a good vent as well, especially with people in the time now. That's mainly why Dave is doing his shows. He does it every day, 10 past 8 Eastern time in the morning. And it's a quiz show of all weeks of different types of questions. It's very hard to describe. You just need to watch it. But it is good to get, a group of people together to just have that release and tell your stories, because a lot of people are going fucking stir crazy in the house.
That's why we're doing it. So it's just every Monday we've been doing it. And actually sometimes we get like 15 people. Sometimes we get like nobody. That's what I told my story. That was another thing. But so show up and we'll see who's there and have a good time. Hopefully.
Well, hopefully all the stories are of an upbeat measure. But as you do say, man, it is difficult at the time. How is it affecting you? Just to give a wee touch on it. No worse off. I got very sick. I did get COVID. I got immensely sick, and I was almost hospitalized. In the end, I was kind of at the bar, and they decided they went against it. But and it took me a long time to recover. That was difficult for my wife because we have 2 girls. The state of Massachusetts is mandating that parents educate their children. There's a curriculum. The curriculum is absolutely terrible. Yeah. The curriculum, and since I'm a certified teacher in the state of Massachusetts, I can actually say that. And I've spoken to some of our teachers. I was like, guys, listen, I know what the guidelines are. We're violating all of them. Like, well, we had to piece this together. I was like, listen, I've been in situations as a teacher in the state of Massachusetts where we've had to adapt the curriculum for emergency circumstances. This is extreme, but I know how but it's actually a state failing. It's not the teachers failing. At any rate, we have to be teaching our children each 4 hours a day, each different curriculum. And my wife is a PhD in biochemistry. She works at a pharmaceutical company that, among other drugs, has one that targets some of the same receptors that COVID does. So all of a sudden, her work hours have doubled because it turns out that some people are interested in pharmaceuticals now. So her time's doubled.
I work on a news show, so my time's doubled, and we're trying to teach our kids each 4 hours a week. And the reason it's each is because they're in 2 different grades. In fact, they're in 2 different schools. So it's very stressful. I don't think it's that much more stressful than it is for most people. I think the alternative is, and we had on somebody 2 weeks ago who was basically in his house alone.
How old are they?
8 weeks. 9 and 11. So it absolutely should be earning money on YouTube. I keep telling. I mean, it's just like
I was just trying to work out who to tell you to put their playlists up. I think the 11-year-old could take on just the entire paleontology playlist.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about guest co-hosts. We could have on my. Actually, my 8-year-old is like, she's a carbon copy of me, which is really bizarre. It is really, there are things. I once saw her stretching the same way I do. I was like, really? Stretches are inherited? But it's my other one's a carbon copy of my wife. They're not, there's no splitting it's just, and my wife can talk to the other one. I can talk to just because it's bizarre. But they were going stir crazy. They've gotten used to it. You know, we've got a dog. He's a little harder to deal with because we can't get him the levels of exercise that he's used to or needs. So, you know, it's like he starts to get but I mean, it's fine. I think the biggest thing is our concerns for other people. We both have friends who are immunocompromised for one reason or another. In 2 cases, it's because, it's something outside of their control. In one case, it's, in another 2 cases, one is a friend of hers has breast cancer and is getting chemotherapy. If she gets COVID, it will probably kill her.
Yeah.
At any other time, actually, her chemotherapy, high chance of success. This was not a death sentence for her. Now it could be. So it's changed everything, as everybody knows. I mean, there's no. So.
16-year-old and like your daughter, he's me, and but that's not great, and I think we're gonna fucking kill each other. So a lot. But teenagers are hard, and him being stuck in the house, and like, well, he has a job now, so he gets out every few days, but he still can't see his friends, and he's miserable and just loves to make me miserable when he's miserable.
You are in a wonderful state in America at the minute with this situation too, man, aren't you?
Oh yeah, so you're in Massachusetts? Are you from Massachusetts?
Born and raised.
If I called you a masshole, would you be pissed off? Because I'm from Connecticut.
Not in the slightest. Well, if you're from Connecticut, oh well, okay, yeah. No, I think most states get to call us massholes. Connecticut is worse. Give me a break. Don't even. In New England, Connecticut is worse. Don't even go there.
I live in Georgia now, though, so I'm in fucking hell. Okay, this is the worst.
Here, I used to be pissed about the masshole thing. Then I went to California and I realized it's a badge of honor. I'm completely pleased. I was like, please call me a masshole. Then I went to Michigan. Then I lived in Connecticut, right outside of. I lived in Gales Ferry, which is just outside the sub base in Groton. So trust me when I say Connecticut's worse. Don't go there. Let's not you and I pretend. You know what? Okay, fine. If you want. Well, okay. Oh yeah. No, Massachusetts is the problem. Sure. Between you and I. Okay, good. It's because we got an audience here. I'm okay with that.
Oh well, honestly, after moving to the South, I generally miss the people from Massachusetts. So.
That's how bad it. Yeah. Oh. No,
So.
Georgia
that's
has
the only
it
other
tough.
thing. The only other, there's a couple of difficult things too. I will say I've almost broken down crying on stream once or twice because of this. One of the hard ones. So first of all, I have a cousin who is a nurse in New York. Now he is very much he's retired. He's been retired for 10 years. He doesn't have the endurance or the stamina to go back. I mean, he retired not to go into something else. He retired. He was, retirement age. He just got remarried, and he was thinking about it. He was thinking about going back because New York said we need everybody. And his partner said he goes no, because we both know if you go out there, you're not coming back. and he's sitting there, and he knew that. But for a minute, he was making the calculation in his head: how many lives can I save if I go, and how old am I, and who am I saving? And so that was a tough one. There was a show where I talked about my grandfather who did triage in the Battle of the Bulge. He hand glided into the city of Bastogne, and he was a surgeon. He was a combat surgeon in Patton's army and was doing surgery for 48 hours straight. And whenever they lost somebody, and he had to choose between a friend of his and a complete stranger in triage. But the friend of his had less of a who he knew, and he knew his children. He knew he'd seen the letters home. But he had to choose and he lied to his friend and said, "I'll get you, I promise I'll get you." And he knew he was lying. But he put his friend aside, worked on the other guy who had a better chance of survival. It was the rules of triage. And everybody who died, including his friend, they stacked up against the wall of the garage door, the doors, so that that would stop the shrapnel coming in. And then the hardest one for me was the day a nurse, her husband died. He was dying. Her husband was dying in a hospital. And a lot of people weren't being able to come in, but she was a nurse, and so they said, "You can come in and see him. He'll be dead in a few hours. Come in and say what you have to." But she knew that they were running out of masks. Okay, you see, this is having an impact on me already. They were running out of masks, and she knew if she went in, they would have to give her a mask, and they don't have enough. So she decided not to go. So, if you had said, the reason I bring this up actually was because you had said, MathPig, that, I'm always depressing. I am. I can be. And especially recently, that's why we also try to have more lively shows.
Yes.
But I've been going over the numbers for the U.S., and we're staying on top of them because InTime is trying to make projections. And in fact, we created a team of scientists to go in, because I said, these are the numbers that we're seeing. Can somebody confirm this for me before we go out and say these are the numbers? And we actually were not able to come to a consensus yet, but we're trying to come up with numbers even ahead of, we're saying, okay, this is what the CDC is saying, this is what the WHO is saying, this is what we know, this is where they're taking things into account. Let's break it down. We're active, so we are actively doing this. But the numbers look very bad for the next month. They look extraordinarily bad, and they're getting worse. And I have a very hard time being professional on air because you can see me getting angrier and angrier as episodes go, because I'm sitting there going, and the problem is the people I'm getting mad at are the people watching me. They're my audience, but they're all on board with me. They're like, "You're right. This is really bad." I can't tell the people who need to hear it that I'm like, this is what we are seeing. And Trump has basically said he knows it, but he doesn't care. But that wears on me because I continue to do shows, and I feel obligated to. I am obligated to. I made this channel. I knew what it was when I made it, and I said I would do this. So this is what we are doing. And I bring aboard other lunatics like Tony to help with this. Yeah. And, Courtney, anybody who's on board for this is on board for an absolute insane, this is what we're doing. But it's difficult at times like this. There are other times when it's not as hard. This is not easy.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that we are lucky. Sorry, Amanda, go on.
Go ahead.
No, go on ahead. No, I'm just going to ramble. You go on ahead. You sound... Yeah.
I was going to say, because I work in climate science, and it is so fucking depressing sometimes. You feel like throwing up your hands and saying, what the fuck can I actually do? The projections look, if we continue in this direction, it just looks like we're fucked, and you feel so helpless against it. So I get that it can be super depressing, but you have to talk about it. I mean, you can't not. So I get it. That's all I'm saying. Sorry, MathPig.
No, that was it.
So, okay. Well, there you go, guys. Thank you all very much for a marvelous show. Hope we all had fun. I know I'm going to be invited back again sometime real soon.
But this is true, though. These are the things that must be talked about, especially with what's going on at the minute with the COVID and in the long-term projections, as Mom was bringing up about with the climate change. If we don't bring it up and we don't let these people know, a lot of the people in America and around the world, it's a Chinese hoax, and regardless of what it is, it's a Chinese fucking hoax. We need to bring it up, and the fact that it's sad and maybe depressing doesn't mean that we have to ignore it or hide it under the fucking mat. We need to tell people, and just fuck you just have to listen. Well,
actually, I'm really glad. I didn't even realize how much I wanted to talk about it until we just started talking about it now.
Have you
because
seen potholes lately?
I don't get a chance when I'm on air. It's every now and then I start to talk about how it's affecting me, but I try to avoid that because it's like I got to keep my shit together. So I was like, oh, I'm sitting here talking. I was like, wow, yeah, this is really not easy. Oh.
But it's not. No, anything worth doing is always difficult.
Yeah. And we have Dave is a mod. We have the other thing is for us on mods, you have to volunteer to be a mod. We don't go out and seek mods for the most part. You have to volunteer. You have to sign a document that just says these are the rules. You're going to follow them. So I mean, again, we're really trying to be a professional channel from top to bottom. And so, Dave has volunteered. Anybody who's here is here because they want to be, and I consider myself very lucky to have that. I am lucky to have that. So, and that's a huge part of it. And I don't have to worry about the live chat because people are on it. I almost never even watch it. I stay out of it. And it's everybody that we have working for us. We try to have people who are who want to do a good job and are dedicated to it and who see what it is we're trying to do. And if you see what we're trying to do and if you're pushing towards it, you can stay. And if not, you're done. That's about it.
Yeah, it's not what you say, it's what you do. A lot of that, people come up and go, I can do this and I can do that. Well, then step up, and if you're that sort of decent person and you prove to be a decent person, then you get respect for that. You don't get respect earned, it's not given.
Well, and a lot of people, the other interesting thing is a lot of people think they know what they want, and they say that, and if you give them a lie detector, they say, oh, yes, I want this. But really, they do the opposite. Because there are channels where people say, well, gee, I want to do something like education. I want to educate people. And if you hook them up to a lie detector, they'll pass. They'll say, yeah, that's their goal. But then instead they chase, sort of drama stuff. And that's what ends up on the channel is all the drama. Like, well, I don't like drama, but that's what's ending up here. What?
That's easy. That's the drama stuff is easy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. And so that's a good, yeah. That's good. They just take the.
I think it's the adrenaline hit from people watching you.
Yeah.
That you can get that quicker from drama than you can from decent content.
I think that's true. Well, that's well, yes, it is. I will tell you this. That is the one thing where we are really lucky on InTime because breaking news, if it's big news, it's drama. It is drama, and I get to do that. But I get to do that in I think a positive way. But there is something, and again, recently I've been doing most of the breaking news on my own. But I think some of my favorite times was Ansgar and I, and we get our links from the producer. We pop in, and we're just talking about the show, and it's literally we're like, okay, and there's just a countdown as to when we're supposed to go live. And we often miss it because we're in time, not on time. Yeah. But we know every second counts, and he and I are feeding information. He says, okay, Nick, this happened. I was like, okay, wait, where are you reading that? He goes, I'm reading that here, and here. He goes, but didn't you say you had it? I was like, yeah, I'm using the same source you are. So no, it's not verified. It's like, okay. and we're trying to get everything down so that when we come out, it looks like we've known it all the time. It's just sort of like, oh, we've known for 16 years that this is, so that we're the experts on it. And it's just like, it's insanely crazy, and it's just 1,000 things happening at once. But I really enjoy that. I enjoy I love it. I think the breaking news tend to be my favorite ones. There are a few interviews that have been spectacular too, but it's the drama. But at least that drama, but yeah, not to derail the.
Oh no! Yeah, no.
Different kind of drama. That's understandable.
Yeah, it is, and I'm not gonna put up a front and say that I don't like it. I do. That's but I like it also because it's a genuine test of your skills. How much, because it is our reputations going out there. I am a published author. I've got books. I've got I don't teach high school anymore. I could go back if I wanted to, but that's the other thing is I gotta be a little careful because if I go back and start teaching high school again, it's sort of like it's like, oh, here's Mr. Souter going on air using the F word 1,600 times.
Tony wants to know if he's your favorite mod.
Who?
Yeah.
Tony who?
Design.
Tony Montana? I've been going after him for a while about Fat Tony. we've wanted Fat Tony for some time. He's he's that mobster on The Simpsons. He is certainly, I think, despite being a cartoon figure, is more credible than some of the mods on InTime. And but so far, we've had nothing.
At the very start, when you were starting, is there anything that went drastically wrong? Did any streams ever crash, or was there any real bad production problems, or did you sit and talk for 25 minutes and not realize you were muted, seeing as you don't look at the chat?
No, the closest we had, and this is where we actually had someone break into our air successfully. So there was a guest that was not supposed to be on, and ended up coming on. We had two guests. We were only supposed to have one. The other guest wasn't supposed to have the key. The other guest was able to get the key and came into the room. Now, when you come into the room, even if you have the key, you have to be authorized by Ansgar or myself. I saw the guest. I was just like, ooh. I knew how they got the key, but I was like, okay. I just was going to leave it. I was in the middle of doing 20 things. We were going into a breaking news story. I was just going to leave it. And I think the other person just wanted to be on the air. That was it. And we had told them, look, we appreciate the story. They helped us get the story. We're like, we appreciate the story, but you're not qualified. You have nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, but I can help. I can facilitate conversation. No, that's not how we do things. We've got an expert that we need. No problem. 2 minutes later, that person, poof, appearing on the thing. I'm just like, I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to worry about it. Ansgar figured, oh, I guess Nick gave him the key. Poof, lets the person in. I was like, whoa, what? All of a sudden, the person's in the room. Conversation starting, and we're live. And I was just like,
fuck.
And I remember afterwards, I was just like, yeah. He's like, why did you give them the key? I was like, I didn't. He's like, oh. He was like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, it has nothing. Of course you would assume that. And then so we had to change all of our procedures. But that's the one that comes to mind. I think there have been a couple of other just sort of disaster ones. I mean, we were able to pull that out. That stream actually is not available. We took it down because listen, it was a decent show. It was a decent show. It's not that it was a bad show, and you couldn't tell anything was wrong. It wasn't to our standard of professionalism, so it's unlisted.
Oh, yeah.
It just is.
At least they didn't come on and start screaming at each other.
Oh, they liked each other. They knew each other, and I think they wanted to do it together, and that's fine. But they can't do it on our show together. That wasn't the deal. But it ended up being. So yeah, I can't think of anything else that was catastrophic. I'm sure I'll have a few in my.
Something very.
I'm trying to think. Yeah.
Something very similar happened here in Come On, and they were screaming and shouting, and then I muted the entire stream, screamed at the person for doing that, and then went back and went, right, we're all going to leave now, bye. It's just like, oh, we tried, it's just no. But live production, that is what makes it. That's what I see as the appeal over having a news channel on the TV, over watching TV. Is definitely the appeal of it is the live here.
Oh, the only other one, actually, there was one that was pretty close to a catastrophe. It was saved by a lot of people. I had nothing to do with saving it. It was saved by just about everyone else but me. We were doing Fred the Felon, who you may or may not know. Everyone here probably knows who Yang is, Andrew Yang. He was a American contender for the Democratic ticket for president. And Yang had picked up a guy called Fred the Felon. And Fred the Felon was a Republican, voted for Trump, and decided when Yang went into New Mexico, Yang said, hey, any truckers want to ride along with me and just follow me around? And Fred the Felon was like, oh, I'm going to troll his ass so big, and started following him around. And then they started talking. He goes, wow, I actually really kind of like the guy. And then started actually working for him and started helping with his campaign. So, but Fred the Felon was the equivalent to Joe the Plumber. Joe the Plumber was, what's his name? McCain's when McCain was running against Obama. Joe the Plumber said, Obama's going to wipe me out of business. And John McCain said, hey, join along. And then all of a sudden they're bringing him out. So Fred the Felon is coming out at rallies, all this other stuff. We landed him. Said, okay, could bring him in. And we're talking to him. And he was doing most of his interview from the truck. So it'd be going through on the truck. Ansgar and I are talking about him. And I forget what he said, but he started, we knew that there was going to be some issues with it because he is a felon. He's gotten himself into a lot of trouble. He is a staunch conservative, but he started, I'm an alpha male, women just love me. And then he starts saying some grossly misogynistic shit.
Yes.
And I'm just like, I wasn't, how well did we vet him before bringing him on here? It's like, can we? And so Oscar and I are starting to try to figure out how to deal with this. And it starts going sideways. He starts going off, not on Yang, but on why women are women and why men are men. And we're no longer talking about Yang. We're talking about a whole bunch of really sexist shit.
Yeah.
And his views are really sexist. And so we're trying to figure out how to deal with it. And everybody had different ideas. We sort of tried my way at first. It didn't really work well. Headed towards Ansgar's way, and Ansgar was able to start to diffuse it. And then a few other people came into the hangout afterwards. And by the time it was done, everybody was all happy. By the after show, everybody was okay. But during that episode, that got uncomfortable because we were there to talk about Yang. We start talking about, we knew sexism, racism, and homophobia would come up because he admitted to having issues in these areas, and now he's with Yang and he's all better and all this. So I'm like, okay, we'll have that discussion. But when he starts going into what women need a man to do for them, and that's what he does because he's a big alpha. And once he realized he was an alpha and superior to most other men, then his life became a lot easier. I was just like, I'm sorry. I was looking for Fred the Felon. Oh, Fred the Felon. Maybe that should have been a tip-off. We might have a problem.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he's coming out at Yang rallies. He's at the front center at Yang rallies in front of millions of people. Millions of people in there, but tens of thousands of people at the rallies. And he ended up being a decent guy, but it took a lot more management than we were prepared for. We just did not see that. That was a difficult. And the live chat exploded. Like, start hitting him on this, start hitting him. And I was like, well, that's not what we do. It's not what. But on the flip side, he does need pushback. I was like, oh boy. But it worked out. But that was a long hour.
Well, question from the chat from Brainbug. What is your insight on Biden's chances in November?
Oh Jesus. Yeah, there's a lot of. I've been banting that around with people I trust. I am more optimistic than most, but I'm still not all that optimistic. I think the issues with women are going to start to become a problem. I do think. Right. It depends on how he plays it because he can play it any number of ways. And this is the other thing that most people don't know. I was actually the district coordinator for the 2nd Congressional District in Connecticut during the Obama campaign. So I actually worked as a professional political operative for about 2 years. So I've done strategizing about this kind of thing. In my view, Trump actually may have a problem because his base is the Fox viewership, and most of them are the ones who are getting hardest hit. Nursing homes in particular. Yeah. Nursing homes in this country are having issues, and we haven't seen anything like it. And I keep banting off, and I used to know the numbers, and now I'm kind of forgetting them. But if I recall, if 20% of the United States catches COVID, and the mortality rate is in fact the 3.7% that the World Health Organization believes it is, and I think it's higher for a number of reasons, but let's say it's 3.7. That is, I think, 2.7 million dead. 2.7 million dead, and most of them are going to be the elderly. A number of them are going to be minorities for a number of reasons. So, but the minorities, a lot of minorities are already going to be voting Democrat. That's usually where the Democrats a lot where they vote. So the question is, what's going to happen to independents? The hardcore Republicans are always going to vote there. So the question is, what happens to independents? If you have a parent who died in a nursing home, and if you can be even remotely convinced that this is Trump's fault, now he is a master of taking blame off of himself. Yeah. But he's had some pushback with that so far, and I think he's going to have some more depending. But I'm not as optimistic at the odds as I was earlier. But in a crisis like that, it gets hard to judge. Most of the people I talk with are less optimistic than I am, but I'm still not that optimistic, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it depends if we can get the country working again.
Amanda?
I think one of Trump's fatal mistakes of this whole thing was not sticking to the narrative that they were pushing, the whole blaming China and stuff, because it was something like 9 times between February and April, he said how great President Xi was doing in China. And the GOP and Fox News were trying to push this whole it's all China's fault and everything like that. And that pissed off some of his base. I don't know if it's enough to do anything to change their minds. And my biggest fear is all the gerrymandering that the GOP has done in the past 3.5 years, that it will completely fuck the whole electorate. So I don't know if that's an issue or not. I think we're probably going to end up with another 4 years of Trump, to be honest with you, and that fucking sucks.
Well, in general, the gerrymandering isn't a problem so much for the general election. It's a problem for elections of representatives, senators, and governors actually more so than most people get into. And that's why a disproportionate number of governors are in fact Republican. But the governors then, once the Republicans, this was the strategy actually first put forth by Karl Rove, which was to go after the governors. That was really smart. So what he said is, we're going to get as many Republican governors as possible, and that's how we get the presidency. And here's how he did it. Starts going after the governors through gerrymandering. Once you have the governors allow the gerrymandering. Sorry, you get the governors first without gerrymandering. Once you have the governors, they allow gerrymandering, which allows you to get the senators and the representatives. Once you have those, then you can control that branch of House, and then you start going after the presidency and the judiciary. But I think here's the deal. I think the reason people voted for Trump was because the biggest reason was because he pissed off the liberals. That's it. There's no way. It's really nice to say that Republicans are stupid and didn't realize he was a con man. No, I think they're not that stupid. They knew he was a con man. Anybody who sits on a golden toilet. I mean, he had to buy the toilet, have it installed. He sits on a golden toilet, but people are going to say he is the epitome of the common man. No, nobody believed that. But he pissed off the liberals, and so that's why they voted for him. So now the question is, how stupid does he have to look before people are going to say, you know what, there's more important things? And he knows the narrative to give. He knows to talk about the economy. He knows to talk about the things that's important to them. But again, if people start dying, and he's sitting there saying, because he did, that was the moment where he sat there and said, let's look into whether or not people should be injecting Lysol. I mean, that's essentially what he said. And if people put this out and say, okay, this is why people are dead, maybe the World Health Organization fucked it up, maybe other ones, but this is the guy who was leading us who said inject Lysol. And I think a lot of them are going to be sitting there saying, I may not vote for Biden, but I won't vote for that. And that's the biggie. The problem is the independents. What are the independents going to do? And if you can get 10% of the Republicans to stay home, that changes everything. That's where it is. And it has to be the 10% that says, yeah, I'd rather the Republican Party win, but not by that much. I love my country more. That's the 10% you need.
Who do you think is more dangerous, though? More Trump or more McConnell?
Oh, Jesus. Probably McConnell.
Absolutely.
What I'm going to do is because McConnell's just had much more success, and McConnell will stick around. McConnell doesn't have a term limit. Although I've always said this, and this was the other thing. I'll say two things on that. First of all, let me put this down because I think that light is causing glare.
You were looking like an angel earlier.
I always, first of all, I don't think Trump is president. I think Paul Ryan is president, but that's a whole nother story. I think, Ed, there are a couple of problems with my argument, but for the most part, I think that's actually a reasonably sound argument. I think the proper president of the United States right now is Paul Ryan. But I've always said that I would be very happy to remove Trump for Pence, because while I'm actually my views are closer aligned to Trump, which is saying something. Pence is really far out there. Pence is at least qualified. Pence is qualified. And people have sat there and said, yeah, but he hates gays. He's the antithesis of the liberal agenda, which Trump actually tolerates. I was like, I don't give a fuck. Trump, you have the nuclear codes with someone who's not qualified. Now it's sort of like COVID's happening. It's like, see, this is what I meant about being qualified. Pence would be getting this right. Everybody felt so much better when they're like, oh, Pence is going to be in charge of this. Like, now, of course, Pence hasn't been in charge of this, but that's why you have to have somebody qualified over the ideology first. The reason I think Ryan is president is because I think that was not a valid election. I think that it is credible that, in fact, it's not only credible, but at this point, we know that Hillary lost because of the Russian meddling. Because if you take a look at the individual districts that were swing districts, she lost by, the total was, I think, maybe 1,200 votes in the right district. Would have given her the delegates she needed to win. Okay, if Russian meddling did that, at that point you have to invalidate the election. Now, you cannot give it to Hillary, because even though you know that she would have won but for, that's not a mathematical certainty. You cannot prove that scientifically. You can say mathematically, okay, we really know this, but it's not the same kind of thing. But you can't give it to Trump, because all the evidence is the reason he won was for meddling. Okay, that invalidates the election. So on January 7th, when the new president is supposed to take over, there's no president. Okay, who should it be then? The vice president. There's no vice president either. So who is it? It's the Speaker of the House, who is Paul Ryan.
Ryan. Okay, I was going to say, because, like, I agree that I don't really think Trump is in charge. I mean, you look at his schedule, and he has like one briefing a day, and the rest of it is all just open. Like, now he's doing the whole, COVID talks every day just because he can't have his rallies. So this is his way of doing his rallies. But he's just a mouthpiece right now. But unfortunately, his mouth has all of this crazy, dangerous rhetoric that comes out of it that ends up making, even though he's not really in charge, and the people like McConnell are, it's still incredibly dangerous, and it's fucking up our country.
Well, no, he's in charge of the executive branch, and he really is, and he's screwing up the country by doing that. I mean, the things that he's doing, that McConnell has a lot of power, but actually Trump has more power than McConnell. The reason he has more power than McConnell is because McConnell's giving it to him and letting him have it. That's what the impeachment was about. So the impeachment was McConnell exercising his power to keep the Republicans in charge. All McConnell wants is for the Republicans to maintain their dominance in the United States. That's all he wants. Trump doesn't give a shit. Trump just wants to stay in power himself, and he wants to be remembered as the biggest and bestest president ever, with all the biggest words and the bestest ideas.
Yeah.
That's all he cares about. That is all he cares about. So McConnell is perfectly happy to do whatever it takes to empower Trump to do what he wants to. And that includes passing just these ludicrous agendas. But that's why Trump actually right now has more power. Long term, he doesn't. Long term, McConnell's the bigger problem by a lot. But I think Trump pulled all the funding for the United States from the World Health Organization. The United States is the largest national donor in terms of dues-paying members to the World Health Organizations, and we are the largest voluntary member, and the voluntary budget makes up 80% of the World Health Organization's budget, and we pulled our donation because Trump wants to blame them. Now, that's dangerous. That's very dangerous. And sitting there and during a pandemic saying that the World Health Organization we've got enough problems, and sitting there saying that we should open up, and that's Trump. That is Trump. McConnell's not pushing that. Trump is the one who is opening the U.S. up, and who is telling states that are in lockdown, open up your state and free your prisoners, which some states are actually legit freeing prisoners out of jail, but that's another story. Trump is hugely dangerous.
Yeah. No, like I said, I live in Georgia, and we were pretty much the first to open. In fact, our governor opened the beaches like a month and a half ago. I mean, it's even Trump said that when Kent, our governor, he wanted to open everything up, he just flat out was like, yeah, let's do tattoo parlors and salons and massage parlors and all that stuff. And even Trump said, well, that might be a bridge too far. And Kent was like, nah, fuck it, let's just do it. So, and we have the busiest airport in the world in Georgia, out of Atlanta, Hartsfield-Jackson. So we were hit hard to begin with, and it has not been easy. Even in the town that I live in, we've had cases that teachers have been sick. Our hospital has been overrun, and we're not a huge town, but it's been pretty bad because we're not that far outside of Atlanta. So
somebody has to explain this to me. Minnesota, I think it was, opened for all non-touch services. So car washes, that's an automated service. So they open for that. They open for all these all of these things non-touch, including massage parlors. And I'm saying somebody needs to explain that to me. I guess I've been getting massages the wrong way. I don't.
Beating them with tennis rackets or something?
Don't.
The reeds, the ones they do where they hit you with.
Oh
the
yeah,
reeds.
they do it. That's what it is. That's a massage. Okay. Normally I call that getting home late and the wife is pissed at me. But at any rate, oh dear Lord, yeah. I think it's too early to call that. Actually, I think it's too early to give any informed opinion on what's going to happen. There are too many balls in the air to give any informed opinion. Biden's got legit problems on some of these women's issues, but so here's what you got to realize. I said this. Okay, rough numbers: 40% of Americans are going to vote for Biden no matter what, because they recognize that you can't do Trump. You just can't. And most of them are Democrats, liberals anyway. They will vote for Biden, and he's actually, he's been in the White House before, so he's reasonably well experienced. Another 40% are going to vote for Trump, no matter what. So the question is, what is that 20% going to do? What is that? That's going to be based also in part by his VP pick. So since he hasn't done a VP pick, it's very hard to predict this. So even most of these predictions that we're banting around is going to be meaningless in a short period of time. Once he's got his VP pick, once he figures out what his real message is going to be, and he should try to avoid he's got attack dogs. There are other people who are going to sit there and make Trump look bad. Don't try to make Trump look bad. Be for something, not against somebody. So if he can be for something and allow other people to say, hey, wait a minute, you do realize here's all the things that Trump has done just catastrophically wrong, and say that to the 20% independents, that's where the election's won. Now the question is, can he do that, and can the people helping Trump fight that? I think he's got a good shot at that 20%, but he has to do it right.
Here's the problem with the women's issues, because I mean both Trump and Biden have their issues, even though Trump's is just exponentially worse. What he is, been accused of, and even what he dealt with as soon as he came into the presidency was the 16-year-old girl, whatever. The problem is that the Democratic base, the liberals actually give a shit and will look down on Biden for it, whereas the Republicans don't give a fuck about any of it, and will just say that it never happened, or just completely let it pass without holding him accountable for anything that he's done. I don't get that at all. So
I'll say Tony just passed this up through the live chat, but I had seen it. This was breaking. And it's a breaking news, differing based on this was breaking actually before. This was breaking before the first show, which was Trump has now said that he's been taking as a prophylactic hydrochloroquine.
Yeah. I call bullshit on that so fucking hard.
Actually, I do too. I don't believe him. I don't believe him. He would be so sick if he was. He'd be so sick if he was taking that.
Sorry, Dave.
Sorry, no, go on.
Well, we had somebody. There was on our last, like I said. So tonight, 9 p.m. on InTime. Come join us as we discuss stories from lockdown, and we're all going to tell. And last week on Stories from Lockdown on InTime exclusively for those of you who want to join us, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. We had on a guy who was, I think he lives in Florida, and he has to take it. He's on it, not for malaria, but because he's got a very bad arthritic condition, and yes, it works. But he's like, if I recall, he was even in a wheelchair. And he takes hydrochloroquine. It helps keep him alive, but it does damage to his kidneys. Yeah. He said he has to get his eyesight checked regularly because one of the other side effects that isn't on the label, but they know, is sudden blindness, like permanent. It's just poof, you're blind. And wow. He's just like, this is, and that it's a little bit like lithium in that sense, that the difference between the efficacious dose and the toxic dose is razor thin. So you have to be talking to a doctor and checking in all the time so you don't die. And a lot of the patients that they were giving this to as a test have died. So and now he can't get his prescriptions anymore because all of a sudden Trump is hoarding the stuff. But nonetheless, there's no way Trump's taking it. He'd be sick if he was taking it.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Again, the parroting, the enabling, the trade-off, I can't figure out the trade-off. It makes no sense. At first, it seemed to be money, but that was just an illusion. And the only thing left are the courts. They're filling the courts with conservative judges. That's the only thing I see.
Yes, they are.
They're enabling them, and that's the weirdest thing to me.
Well, that's where the gerrymandering comes in. That was a really good. And by the way, I mean, Dems do that, but I mean, the Republicans have just turned it into a extraordinarily vicious art form. Yeah. They really know what they're doing with that.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, those courts, Senate, congressmen, they don't go by the electoral vote. They go by popular vote, and that has to be actually spread out and taught. The only thing that goes by the electoral college is the presidency. Everything else is popular vote.
Well, I don't know if it is across the board. I believe states have a right to choose their representatives anywhere they want. And there may be some that use something other than popular vote, but if there is, I'm not aware of them. I'm not going to.
Senate and Congress are popular vote. Definitely Senate and Congress. Yeah.
All right. So there is, before the Supreme Court last, if I recall, at least one gerrymandering issue. There may have been another one, and there was one that the court overturned the gerrymandering, and then they reapplied on something else. And the court maybe looks like they're going to uphold the gerrymandering. But if they can overturn that, I think things are going to improve in this country a lot. I think it's obvious. First of all, I think they're going to improve because my side that gets their asses handed to them by the gerrymandering. But that aside, I think that's more in keeping with what this country is supposed to be. That's the other thing is we have on Landon Knowles, so we cover civics a lot, but we're starting a new series on civics with Landon Knowles. It starts next week. And when you had asked who I have on, I failed to mention that one. But he's going to be on every second Thursday. And we're starting with the Constitution. But he's talked about, I mean, the reality is, a very small handful of Americans have ever voted for president. You've never voted for president. What you voted for is to tell your state who you want them to pick as electors. And the reality is the states in many cases aren't even bound by that. So the states could just sit there and say, well, there was a vote, but we're going to pick these people. Right. And it's happened. And then those electors can be faithless electors, and they go off and do so. You've never voted. You voted for people to do the voting for you. Yeah. And when you understand how this process works, it works very differently than most people understand. So we are actually starting an entire series on that on InTime. But I think you brought up a couple of good points there as well. So I can't wait till, because again, the First Amendment, it's like, you can't kick me off of Twitter because I have a First Amendment right to speak. What?
Yeah, there's limits.
Again, it boils down to the education, man. People need to be taught these things to know the difference, and education is lacking in a lot of places.
Yep.
Have we?
All right, well, I'm going to need to be wrapping up in about 5 minutes. So
I was just about to say that. Have we any questions from the chat for Nick? Yeah. If anyone has anything that they want to ask Nick, that's not going to do another 20-minute comment.
That was good. Listen, there are very few questions that don't take me 20 minutes to answer. But
it's not a question, but in Australia they have compulsory voting, and I really wish they had that here, because that would make a big difference.
At a minimum, it should be a holiday. Sorry.
Have you met your populace?
Oh, Jesus, yeah, the whole South would rebel against that, which is, by the way, part of my, and I'm sorry, but I do think that the North lost the Civil War. And the North lost the Civil War, and our punishment was getting saddled by the South sticking around. But nonetheless.
I live in the South.
Yeah.
How many would scream that it's their right not to vote?
Everybody south of the Mason-Dixon line. Everybody south of the Mason-Dixon line. Who, by the way, also don't understand. Rick Perry, when he was governor of Texas, would have these thinly veiled threats that Texas would leave the Union. Here's the problem. They ranked 41st in education, 41st in education, which is part of the reason why they weren't smart enough to figure out that for every dollar they spend on that goes to the federal government, they actually get $1.30 back. So they're getting an extra 30% back. So they keep talking about how much money we're giving the government. It's coming back to them in highway projects, oil projects, all this other stuff. Yeah. Meanwhile, my state, for every dollar I spend, I get 70 cents back because my money is going to them with their, really rather piss poor education. 30% of their budget comes from the federal government. So if they secede, they have a 30% hole in their budget. Now they say they can make it up in oil, right? No, they can't. The reason they can't make it up on the oil is because who are you going to sell it to? You can sell it to the U.S. without having to pay to ship it, so that's great. But we can buy it from loads of places. So unless you're competitive with it, we're not going to buy it from you. If you decide to try to sell it overseas, what navy is going to help you get it there? Because they're going to be pirates that are going to take the oil. So all of a sudden now you've got an oil problem. You also can't use the interstate highway system anymore because guess who owns that? So they're going to have a 30% hole in their budget. They're going to lose all the tax revenue from the oil because nobody can sell the oil. Everybody's going to go out of work. But this is why Texas is going to be spectacular if it secedes. I'm sitting there going, don't mess with Texas. Fine, secede. I fucking dare you. You will get obliterated. But it's people who don't, it's the rhetoric. And then it's the same people, well, I'm not going to vote. No, you can't make me vote. Why not? Honestly. I mean, I'm okay with not forcing voting. I think we should have at least a holiday. If we really don't want to force people to vote, fine. But honestly, why do we even have to? If you're a proud American, why aren't you voting?
Yeah.
So,
well, that's my rant. I have a thing with Texas, by the way. Don't bring up Texas. I know I'm the one who brought up Texas, but I'm actually going to blame Mama. I don't take responsibility for anything I do. I have to blame other people.
No. Well, Nick, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. I had an awful lot of fun. Definitely was an awful lot of fun. And tonight, in an hour and a half, next channel, Dave will pop the links in the chat to not questions from the fucking thing. That's Dave's. Stories from the quarantine.
Link questions. I can do link questions.
Yeah, link questions too. Link everybody, Dave. Do your thing. That's why we keep you around.
Actually, if you have or I could just drop the link. If somebody's got the link to the show, because it's already up, the actual tonight's show. But if not, that's fine. But all right, perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, Amanda, have you got anything coming up this week?
No.
Maybe. Some
Maybe.
states.
I don't know.
Well, next week I've got Chris Shelton coming on Sunday, so that should be fun. Dave, you're doing some mad 100 questions in an hour on Wednesday, is it?
Yeah, Wednesday evening.
Wednesday
afternoon for Americans.
Yeah, Wednesday afternoon for Americans. And Sal in the top corner, always being good, donating art and helping everybody out with their channels and stuff. And everything you see here all comes from Sal, so I really appreciate the help that Sal puts in too.
Always.
Well, on that there, Nick has things to do and get ready for his show. I appreciate everyone coming. Thanks very much for the live chat, for coming and watching. Wouldn't be anything without it. And what we'll do is we'll oink and we'll out. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much.